So you find an asteroid. You want to name the thing. The first few were named in the same basic convention that already existed. For example, we had planets named Mercury and Venus and Mars and Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus. About the time that they were searching for the asteroids, they found another one out there they named Neptune, named after Roman gods. So they started naming some of the asteroids: Ceres, Pallas, Juno, Vesta. And so these were also named after Roman gods and goddesses. And they started quickly finding out, that they had a lot of them that are out there, a lot of asteroids, and they started running out of names in mythology. They used some Greek names and so forth, and so pretty soon they ran out of names. And so the astronomers were just kind of free to name it as they saw fit. Many of them named it after wives and girlfriends or mothers, and so what happened is for quite a number of years there, they were naming it after females. So there's a whole list of female names. There's a Laura and a Linda and an Emily and so forth. And so there's all these names out there. Some of them were named after patrons that gave them money that funded their research, or named after cities or places where they were based. Eventually, though, they realized there needed to be a unified way of doing this. So in the early part of the 20th century, the International Astronomical Union decided that they can't just have everybody just naming things. And so they established a commission on names. So the IAU is the only ones that can officially name something. You discover a star, you don't get to name the star. You discover an asteroid, you don't get to name the asteroid. Craters on the moon, you don't get to name those craters. Okay. What happens is the IAU commission does this. Now, what they will do is they'll take into account when someone discovers something, that person, the discoverer, can suggest a name. And usually the IAU Commission will go along with that with certain exceptions. They have some rules for naming asteroids, and one of those rules is you cannot name it after someone controversial or in general ill regard. You may not name your asteroid Adolf Hitler or Saddam Hussein. There's several other sort of things here that you also don't want to do. You don't want to trivialize it. You don't want to make your asteroid a joke, because it's very serious naming these things. So you can't name it, after something that's a joke. Okay. So you have to be careful about that. Now, the other thing is they numbered the asteroids by order of discovery. So Ceres, being the very first asteroid discovered, is often called 1 Ceres. And then 2 Pallas and 3 Juno and so forth, 4 Vesta. And so they were in order of discovery. Okay, so the naming of the asteroids, the asteroid discovered gets to suggest a name. If it's approved by the IAU Commission, then it becomes an official name. Okay, and so that's it. But you're not permitted to name the asteroid until several conditions are met. First of all, there's so many asteroids that are out there that it's really hard for everything to get named. Secondly, they had discovered some asteroids and then lost track of them. And so you lose track of an asteroid. You don't want to have it have a name, and then you lose track of it. Then someone else discovers, and they want to name it. So what do you call this thing? Okay. So the rule is that you cannot name your asteroid unless it has been well enough tracked, that the orbit is predictable enough that it's not going to get lost again, that when astronomers go to look at where they calculate it ought to be, that it actually is there. Okay, so first thing that happens when you get an asteroid discovery is it gets a temporary designation. So the temporary designation is the year of discovery. So my example here, 2005 FH. The 2005 means that was discovered in 2005. Okay, the FH, okay, the first letter is going to be a letter that tells what time during the year. So F would mean that was discovered in the second half of March. Okay, so when I'm taping this lecture, it is the first half of October. So if I were to discover an asteroid right now, that asteroid would be called 2020 T something. Okay, now the second letter is A, B, C, D, and so forth. The order, the first one you discover during that month or during that half month is A, and then B, and C, and so forth. Okay, so 2005 FH, H is the 8th letter in the alphabet, so that's the 8th asteroid discovered in the second half of March. Okay, so that's how you decipher that name. They skip the letter I because I and J are interchangeable in certain countries. So you don't want to have even added confusion here. So you skip the letter I. That gives you 25 names. Now, for a long time, there was, only a handful of asteroids being discovered, and then it got more and more. But you still had like dozens, only a couple, 2 or 3 dozen discovered per month. And so this system worked just fine, except eventually they got to where they were discovering asteroids way more than that, because with new automated telescopes that scan the sky looking for moving things, so the telescope just points, here and takes a picture, points to another part of the sky, takes a picture, points to another part of the sky, takes a picture, goes back, takes a picture of the same thing over again, an hour or two later, and the computer goes through and just finds moving dots. Okay, so these automated searches are discovering thousands of asteroids, and so way more sometimes than that 25. And so in that case, they go back and recycle, and they do 1, 2, 3. So in other words, 2004 AB1. Okay, so A is the first half of January, so it goes A to AZ, and then it goes AA1, or AB1, AC1, AD1, AE1, and so forth. Okay, if you get all the way down to the end of the alphabet again, get AZ1, you go back and do AZ2, and then, or rather AA2, AAB2, AC2. So if it were AB2, then AB2 would have been the 68th asteroid discovered in that time, that part of the year. And likewise, XS2, rather, so not 68, but it'd be the 52nd asteroid discovered. AB2 would be the 52nd asteroid discovered. So XS2 would be the 68th asteroid discovered in the first half of December. So that's how these things get their preliminary designations. They get, first of all, a discovery designation, which is basically just a code for a particular observatory and a number of that. If a second astronomer finds it, and then it's verified as a discovery, then it gets this preliminary designation that you see here. And then if it's recovered again and you go through at least 4 synodic periods, then it gets an official number. Okay, once it gets that number, it still has that provisional designation unless the discoverer decides to submit a name. Now, sometimes the AU just goes out and names them, but very rarely do they do that. If someone has discovered it without consulting with the one who discovered it, say, would you prefer to name it something? So that's how they get their names. The numbers are assigned in order of discovery. So you get 1 Ceres, 2 Pallas, 3 Juno, 4 Vesta, as I said. Okay. Over 500,000 asteroids have numbers. Over 400,000 of them have provisional designations. That means we have found and cataloged almost 1 million asteroids, and we think that we've only found a fraction of the ones that are out there. There's probably several more. Even though about 500,000 of these things have been found and numbered, only about 22,000 of them have names. And so that's that indicates that this is a monumental task to actually have a committee meet and name all these things. And so most of them retain their provisional designations. Some of the asteroid names that are out there, we have 1862 Apollo. That does not mean it was discovered in 1862. That means it's the 1,862nd asteroid. We have Gaspra, Ida, and Eros. Those are, and Europa. Those are historical figures. Itokawa, asteroid 25,143. Itokawa, that's named after a Japanese astronomer right there. We got Matilda right here. We got Robin. We got Sandra. Jodie Foster played an astronaut in a movie, and so they named an asteroid after her. Gene Roddenberry got an asteroid named after him, asteroid 4659 Roddenberry. Anne Frank has an asteroid named after her, asteroid 5535 Anne Frank. This asteroid here, McAuliffe, and this Rick Husband. Krista McAuliffe was a teacher that was being flown into space as part of NASA's education program in the Challenger, which blew up a few seconds after launch. Rick Husband was an astronaut that was on board the Columbia when it burned up and was destroyed, re-entering the atmosphere over Texas. And so those are two that were named after astronauts. So good way of getting an asteroid named after you is die in space. All right, so maybe that's not a good way of naming it after you.